Hey there, welcome into the Unpaid Interns podcast. I'm Griffin Epstein. Happy Friday. It is our penultimate Friday show of the semester here on Unpaid Interns. We have a great guest to close out the week. Dr. Galen Clavio joins me again on the Unpaid Interns podcast. And it's funny because it's almost his creation, this podcast, the director of the IU Sports Media Program. So welcome back to your creation. Hopefully I haven't destroyed it too much.
No, it's been great. Thank you for having me back. It's funny. It started about a year ago, and Austin Render was hosting it at first. You've done an awesome job with it, and it's really become one of our first franchise podcast shows. So always great to come back.
It's good to talk to you. And I wanted to start this podcast off with, as you said, it's been now over a year since the pandemic started. And, this is one adjustment you've had to make in the sports media program, and sports media as a whole has had to adjust. As an industry and someone that studies and is very much involved in the industry, how have you seen it change so far? And are these changes permanent as we kind of start heading back to normal?
Yeah, there's a lot of changes that have happened. I think some of them probably are permanent. The biggest one to me, to start with, I think, is this idea of how we conceive of content and what's considered acceptable in the big scheme of things. So right now, I'm sitting here in my office at home, you're sitting in your apartment, and it's okay that we're in that space. We're not in a big studio. We're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on the set around us. And I think you see that on ESPN, you see it on Fox, where they've got some people in the studio, but a lot of times what you're dealing with is people at home, people with setups, they're broadcasting games from home. And so I think that is probably going to be a permanent change, because if you don't need to spend all that money on sets and you don't need to have everybody in one place, what's the point? So that's one of them. I think the other one really that I'm looking at from a permanent change perspective is this idea of and this was kind of coming already. I think COVID helped it along. This idea of shorter pieces of content that are social media oriented, that aren't necessarily needing to be watched right when they're made. This idea that people will consume things when they can, rather than at the time that a network says that you need to consume them. So I like that. I think that, more and more, the only thing that really matters in terms of it has to happen right at that moment is live sports programming. Everything else can kind of be shifted around. And to some degree, I think that gives people a lot more creative options because they're not tied to a particular schedule.
You mentioned those two big changes, both that you can now kind of broadcast from everywhere and having these, short, social media segments that people can be attracted to. From people that work in the industry and current sports media professionals, how are they adjusting to these changes and how should they going forward?
It's been a little bit rough, I think, particularly for people that are normally traveling with teams to broadcast games or, do sideline reporting or whatever. You're just not seeing the same level of, the capacity to do that. One of our alums who teaches for us, Trisha Whitaker, sideline reporter for the Tampa Bay Rays, isn't really able to go on road trips at this point. So she's still covering the games and covering the team, but doing it from the studio back in Florida. And that is, I think, a big jump for a lot of people in the industry to have to deal with. It's like you're supposed to be there covering things in person. And in some cases you've been able to, but there have been some limits placed on that. Beyond that, look, I think for most people, it's been a way to renew their interests in different types of skills. And we've seen people starting podcasts, we've seen people starting video feeds, doing things on their own that are additions to the stuff that they already do professionally, but they've been good additions. I've been listening to, I forget the name of the podcast, but like Carissa Thompson and Aaron Andrews have started a podcast that's been pretty good, and something I was hoping that they were going to do for a long time. And it's been a good listen, and it's probably not something we would have gotten in an era where you were just traveling around and doing the things that you would normally do. So people just adding to the suite of things that they have, on their plate on a week by week basis, I think has been a good one. And I hope that that continues, because I think as we get into more and more of a stable kind of digital content environment like we're in right now, you're going to need to do those things if you're going to be successful, because it's just going to increase your overall brand presence and value as an individual in sports media.
It's certainly interesting. And I bet one thing you've had to think about in this past year, as someone that works with college students every day, is what can they do? You know, students that are coming into college, currently in college, what should they be doing, thinking about getting practice in so they can kind of be ahead of the curve as they then go out into this ever-changing industry that's changing even faster, as we talked about with the pandemic.
So much of it is just repetition, just doing things constantly. But one of the reasons why we wanted to start this show was, you know, the wealth of experience you get doing a show every week or a couple of times a week is more than you're going to get out of a classroom environment necessarily, where you've got, you know, here's this assignment, do this assignment, do that. You know, being able to just work the kinks out in your own delivery, being able to go back and watch content or read content that you produced before on a regular basis. That's, to me, the secret sauce of getting good in media. It's just that practice, it's that repetition, it's getting comfortable with yourself, it's getting comfortable with the audience, and letting the audience get comfortable with you. And so dealing with students, you know, one of my messages is always just continue to try to get experience. Sometimes that's going to be through media outlets, whether it's our student media outlets or whether that's working with somebody else. Sometimes it's just creating something on your own. And the nice thing is the barriers of production are so low now. It costs, I mean, we pay for the subscription to StreamYard, but outside of that, and that's not that expensive, we want you to go out and do your own stuff, put together your own shows, come up with your own ideas. And, you know, to me, that's just invaluable, because as I've watched students over the last decade go out into the industry, the ones that actively tried to create their own stuff and did it on a consistent basis were a lot better prepared for the rigors of the industry and what their employers were going to be throwing at them versus the folks that were just doing kind of the bare necessity, or we're just going to classes and not doing anything else.
That certainly makes sense. And I want to touch on the program a little bit more, on the sports media program. For you and for, you know, helping the program and the students in the sports media program, what have been the challenges? What have been the adjustments that you guys have had to make? And kind of similar question to what I started at the top, I guess, you know, what is staying the same, what's permanent, and what's going to maybe go back to normal as we go back to the so-called normal next fall?
Yeah, well, it's been a lot easier in the spring. Fall was awful. I'll be the first to say. And I think it was probably that way across the country, where we just didn't have sports to cover. And it's hard to give people any kind of sense of what they should be doing, because, you know, when you're at a sports media program like this, there's a rhythm. Like everybody gets to school in August. We know we've got football to cover. We've got basketball starting soon. We've got soccer. We've got all these other things. And to not have that, I think, was really stressful for everybody. And, you know, it's probably for the best, because school in general was stressful for people in September and October and November because of the uncertainty, you know, regarding COVID and just everything that was going on. So this semester's been better. We've been able to get more people involved in a variety of different sports to cover. We've had, you know, pretty much our normal complement of people covering things, and that has helped a lot. You know, it hasn't been the same. I wouldn't pretend to think it was the same. It's been a nightmare. For instance, like Big Ten Student U, which, for those who don't know, these are games that we broadcast in concert with the athletic department. We do about 120 IU sporting events a year on a normal year. And there's, you know, there's always a few games where the schedule will shift around because of, you know, like baseball gets rained out, stuff like that. This semester, it's been, hey, let's schedule. You've been involved in this, Griffin. Like
so many times.
Yeah, schedule people for a game, and then 3 days later, oops, sorry, Northwestern has a COVID pause, so that game is now canceled, or you know, whatever. And it's not just baseball; it's happening all over the place. And so, it's required a lot of patience on the part of our students, and, you know, it's required a lot of logistical addressing that we just normally wouldn't be doing, because most of the time we know what the schedules are, and this year we don't. But I think, by and large, our students have done an awesome job of coming up with new ideas and things to keep themselves occupied. And I'm hopeful we're going to be back to normal soon enough that whatever time we've lost, we'll be able to make up for starting in August and September of this upcoming year.
What's maybe, through these challenges, a success story of a specific project you've seen, a new creation, is something that's gone really well through the pandemic you've seen in the sports media program? That's not this podcast.
It's not this
Of course,
podcast.
of course, that's the obvious answer, right?
Well, I mean, the podcast front, I think, has been one of those areas where we've had a lot of success. I mean, Tamar Scher, who's graduating this year, started the Let's Get Real podcast, and that's been a really good one to see. Actually won third place in the Indiana Association for School Broadcasters podcasting category. So that was really cool to see. I think social media wise, IUS TV has done some awesome work in terms of getting their social media profile up and getting new shows that are targeted directly towards the internet audience up and running. That's been good to see. Over at the Hoosier Network, they started, like, I think it's the Hoosier Sports Beat or Hoosier Sports Report, which is meant to be this very compressed kind of show that's aimed at Instagram stories or Instagram TV. That's gone really well. And certainly the IDS, I think, has done an excellent job with a variety of things that they've done writing wise. So, look, I think everybody's made about the best of the situation that they can. And I think that hopefully we're able to take those lessons and move them forward, because even coming back from the pandemic, there's no reason why shows like this, shouldn't continue on. There's no reason why we can't have more shows like this, because to me, this is how people are consuming media. By and large, especially younger people, which is really what the audience for our sports media program is at a lot of times.
Absolutely. I'm wondering for you, and I don't know if you've ever been asked this question, but, for people that know you, you put so much effort into this program and you've really helped build it up to an elite level for sports media programs across the country over the last 4 or 5 years. What do you find fulfilling about this job? What motivates you, to get up every day and continue making this program better and benefit students for a successful career?
I see the check cleared into your account, Griffin. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm kidding. Look, I appreciate the comment. And what makes me happy in doing this job is when people learn things and then are able to take what they learn and get jobs in the industry when they graduate. And so this is always kind of my favorite time of the year, essentially like March through May or June, when students that I've had a chance to work with, in many cases for the 4 years that they've been here, are able to, call me or text me and say, hey, I've got this job offer. Can I talk with you about it? Or, hey, I have this interview. And then, ideally that turns into, hey, I just got this job. Like, to me, that's great. That's what this is all about, is can we teach you what you need to know to do the thing that you really want to do in life? And it doesn't mean that you're going to be doing it 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Certainly, I was in the business for a while and then I decided I wanted to do something else. But to be able to go through the program and take advantage of the opportunities and then get to the end of it and get the validation that, yes, you are good enough, you did enough, you've accomplished a lot, and now here you get a chance to go do this professionally. To me, that's what makes it all worth it. And so, that combined with just the ability to stay in touch with students that I've had in the past. I mean, I've got probably 30 or 40 students that I regularly keep in touch with, some more than others. And then I've got probably another 150 to 200 students who will email every once in a while and just be like, hey, just wanted to let you know, here's what I'm doing now, and so on and so forth. I really enjoy all of that. And to me, it makes all the other items worth it. We've always had great people at IU. I've said that for years, even before there was a sports media program. So to be able to have something centralized that people can take advantage of and that might give them a leg up in trying to get a job, that to me is what makes it all worth it.
I remember you said at the start of my freshman year to the big sports media meeting, I don't know how public you wanted this statement to be, that you wanted IU, though, to be the next Syracuse for a sports media program. And not there yet, but I think certainly on its way and getting more competitive. And it's starting to be a hot spot for people interested in sports media. So I know many people appreciate the job that you've done.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, look, I mean, shoot for the stars is my opinion. You look at programs like Syracuse or Arizona State or Missouri. I mean, they're great, and they've got a lot of money put into their programs, but what makes them great is the people. What makes them great is the hundreds of alums that they've produced over the years that are working in the business. And it's funny, 20 years ago when I was trying to get into the business, there just weren't that many IU people out there. And now I feel like we're getting more and more IU people into jobs, and they're working at those jobs, and they're making careers for themselves, which then allows us to bring them back and have them be part of what we do here. And that's how you become a great program. And I think that's the case whether you're talking about an athletics program or whether you're talking about a media program. If you can send people out into the business who are really good and they have long careers, and then they can come back and help your students, help the next them essentially get to where they're going, help us find out about job and internship opportunities, help with mentorship. Then there's ownership in the program that goes beyond just me. Like if it was just me, we wouldn't be very good. But it's all the people I went to school with. It's all the people that went to school 20 years before me. It's the people that have been graduates here over the last decade or so. Those are the people that really make the program great. It's the work that they do while they're in school, and then the work that they do after they get out of school, and their willingness to come back and talk with our students or help them with whatever they need. That to me is the key with all of this. And it takes a while to get there. Syracuse didn't become Syracuse overnight. And I think we'll get there eventually.
Certainly the hope, and a lot of great alumni now out there, former Hoosiers. One aspect I know that's been really nice for a lot of people working in IU sports media this year is there's been a lot of excitement around IU sports, a lot of rich storylines, a lot of notable seasons. And, I don't think there's very many people that follow IU sports as closely as you, know the history as well as you. I guess, first of all, where does just this year rank in terms of, memories of overall an IU sports season?
In my sports media literacy class, I joke that people are living through the golden age of Indiana football right now. And I really do, to a large degree, believe that. It's not, I can't say that it's exceeded the 1980s, like the late 1980s, when the program probably reached its historical apex in terms of like a series of years, but it's getting close. And football at IU compared to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, is so much more engrossing and so much more interesting to cover now than it was before. So students getting the opportunity to do that, this is essentially kind of a once in a generation, or maybe a once every 3 or 4 generations event that we're dealing with in football. But then you look across the spectrum, there are so many sports that are highly competitive, have high quality coaches, have high quality players. And to get a chance to come to IU and cover those sports, I think is a tremendous professional benefit for pretty much anybody. The fact that you can get started your freshman year covering, a women's soccer team that's on the rise, covering a women's basketball team that almost made the Final Four. You have a baseball team that's one of the top, if not the top programs in the Big Ten. Softball has become much better than it has been historically. And then to watch the promise of this new basketball regime coming in on the men's side that might be able to lift that up to the levels that we were used to in the 80s and 90s, that's really exciting. So, yeah, I think, if I was going to pick a historical era to come to IU and cover sports, this would be right up there. It's like now the mid to late 80s and I don't know, a couple of years in the late 60s. Beyond that, I don't know if there's been a period where so many programs were so good simultaneously and had the chance of becoming even better.
Well, I certainly picked the right time to be born and come to IU. So grateful for that. I want to ask you a little bit more about IU basketball. It's been a remarkable last month. It feels like every week, Mike Woodson has a great week, and no way he can top that. Monday morning, he's signing a high-level new recruit. He's getting a big-name assistant coach to come in. This week might have been his best week yet, getting Tamar Bates on Monday, who was a borderline 5-star recruit, one of the highest in IU history, and then getting the transfer Miller Kopp from Northwestern, one of the most versatile shooters in the Big Ten. Yeah. Finally kind of completed the roster now. It's all kind of set now for next year. There's clearly a lot of excitement around the program. Is it warranted, or maybe should IU fans at least temper their expectations a little bit for year one of Mike Woodson?
I'll say this. I think that there have been so many unfortunate moments over the course of the last 8 years or so with IU basketball where people got excited and then there was nothing to actually be excited about. I think it's okay to get excited right now because, there's no games, but there's a lot of tangible things going on with the program that are really exciting. Some of them are, like you said, Kopp transferring in, or Xavier Johnson transferring in, or Tamar Bates committing. Like those are tangible things. Those are all really highly regarded players that decided to come to IU. I also think that the coaching staff in general that has been assembled is a really, really exciting coaching staff. Like you look at the amount of investment that's gone into IU basketball. Mike Woodson, his staff, the hiring Thad Matta, keeping Mike Roberts on staff as an associate athletic director. Like these are really, really exciting things because it shows, I think, that IU is committed to this program being good. And so, look, there's always the chance that the games will start and there'll be some growing pains. I think that's almost a certainty. But I don't think that there's a problem with getting excited about where IU basketball is right now. The way that we're measuring basketball teams in the offseason, all of the metrics that we would look at, IU has done tremendously well in. And I think Mike Woodson, at this point, looks like an inspired hire, at least from that perspective. Like, a lot of the criticism of Woodson was based around the idea that he wouldn't be good at recruiting. He wouldn't have the energy to go recruit. He wouldn't know the game. And none of that's proven true. Like, here's a guy who's not only has he brought in players, but the players he's brought in have specifically talked about Mike Woodson being a reason why they wanted to come here. And that's a big deal because that will translate to other recruiting opportunities as we move forward. The on-court basketball coaching, I'm not really that worried about. I mean, this is a guy who coached at the highest level of basketball as a head coach for a decade. It's a lot easier to take the things that you learn there and translate them down to the college level than it is to go the opposite direction, in my opinion. And so I'm excited, and certainly I've been scarred enough over the course of time with IU basketball looking like it was going to be good and then not, that I'm not putting my whole soul out there for it at this point. But I think, be excited, enjoy the fact that the team's got some buzz around it. The program's got some buzz around it. That's just not something we've had a lot of in the last 8 years or so.
That's for certain a big change from just a few months ago. One more quick question for you on IU men's basketball, because this was kind of a discussion point around the time Archie Miller was fired. And I've heard this before, even before I moved to Indiana, just from a national college basketball perspective, that people say the team is not reaching its level of success it had under Bob Knight, in part because the fans and the state is putting so much pressure and so much expectations always on their team that they kind of crumble from that amount of pressure and tension. Do you feel there's any truth to that?
I mean, there may be some truth to it, but I don't think that the pressure here is any greater than at any of the big schools that are out there. It's not like the pressure here is less than it is at, say, Duke or North Carolina. I think the difference is there's success at those schools, and there has been for a while, and there just hasn't been here to that level. When there's been success, it's almost been a surprise. And so, a lot of times the people that have gone out of their way to talk about the job is too much pressure and the players are under too much pressure. Look, I'm certain that there are players that feel that way, and I'm not trying to minimize it. But a lot of times the people that are talking in that way are, to some degree, standing for coaches that have been here before whose excuses were, well, there's too much pressure in the job. I really believe that the right person in the job is going to be the type of person that can turn this into a high-level winning program once again. I don't buy the idea that it's just a death trap sort of place from a career perspective where you can't get things going. Like, it's a very supportive group of fans. It's a very excitable group of fans who generally are on board with whatever's going on and are very patient and until the moment that their patience runs out. And, I think you look at the Archie Miller era, it's if you're looking at it from the outside, you could be like, well, there's IU being unreasonable. It's like, it's not unreasonable to make the NCAA tournament like once in 4 years. The same thing with the Tom Crean era. It's not unreasonable to expect that IU, is able to make tournaments in consecutive years and not have situations where they go from being in the field to being out of it entirely in a short period of time. So, certainly there's pressures with social media, but I think that's the same everywhere. And I think all of those items that you're talking about go away the moment IU starts having regular success again. To me, it's like, it's an effect of the lack of success. It's not a cause.
It's certainly an interesting topic to pay attention to with IU men's basketball. One more question for you on IU athletics in general. Big storyline, IU men's soccer just took home their third straight double-double, Big Ten regular season title, Big Ten tournament title. They start their quest for 9 next week down in North Carolina. I know you're a big soccer guy. I know you follow this team closely. What do you feel like are their chances to take home a 9th national title?
I think they're really good. I think this is a team that's got a tremendous amount of talent. They have a singular offensive talent, Victor Becerra. They have a guy in goal, and Roman Celentano, who just has complete and utter belief in himself. Are they? I don't know if they're any better than the clubs that, or the IU teams that we've seen reach the College Cup in the last few years and not win it. But to some degree, you get to that level and you're playing your equals at that stage, and games don't go your way, whatever. It's part of the game. But I really like the way that this team is playing right now. I think that they believe in themselves. They believe in what they're doing. And I look at the draw that they got. Like, I'm a little worried about Seton Hall. That's a pretty good Seton Hall team that's in their bracket. I don't see them having trouble with anybody else in their bracket. So if that's the game that they're playing to get to the College Cup, that'll be really interesting. And then you get to the College Cup, it's hard to say. I think that the fact that IU's been there before recently, the fact that they've got so much going for them in terms of the talent that's on the roster, the experience that Todd Yeagley and his staff bring to the table, I like their chances as well as anybody else. I am really interested to see how playing on neutral sites will affect IU and the rest of the teams out there. Because one of the great things about IU is that they're normally so good that they're hosting the first 3 rounds of the NCAA tournament. They're not going to be doing that this year. So, does having to play on the road in Wilmington, which that's a long way away, there's not much around it. I don't know how that affects the team, but I like their chances, and I'm excited to see what they're able to do. And right now, I think they've got as good of a chance as anybody in the draw to bring home the College Cup.
Couple more questions, and then I'll let you go on your Friday afternoon. You've been an IU fan since you were born in Lafayette, which I imagine was an interesting experience being an IU fan in the heart of Purdue country.
Wasn't born there, but we moved there when I was 5, which was worse actually, because I had already fully formed my IU fandom at that stage, and then I got parachuted into Purdue country. Anyway, go on.
I'm just wondering if you have a favorite story, a favorite moment from being an IU fan. I'm imagining you have many of them, but pick a good one for us.
Wow. So, I mean, I still distinctly remember the 87 national title game in basketball. I was not that old. I was in 2nd grade. I think I was 7 at the time. And, my dad was one of those IU fans who we'd watch every game. He'd record every game on the VCR, which was like this brand new thing. And we would always listen to Don Fisher, and at the time it was Max Skirvin doing color commentary. So, I greatly remember that game, but probably the one that I have the funniest memory of from that year was the regional final, which was IU versus LSU in the Elite Eight. And I remember my dad had been at sales training in California like the 2 weeks prior, and he got home that morning and the game was on, I think at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so we're watching it, and the IU was playing really badly in the second half to the point that they were down 12 points. And my dad just got up and left, like walked out of the house and didn't come back for like an hour. I guess he was just like walking around the neighborhood at that point. So I was 7 years old. I'm trying to watch the game and keep up with what's going on, but now it's my job to like make sure that the VCR is taping the game properly and things like that. And so there were all these little things. I remember being kind of paranoid about that, but then obviously, what happened with the game at the end was great, with Rick Callaway hitting a shot at the end to send IU to the Final Four. But that was what it was like as an IU fan back then. Like, everybody was on the edge of their seat with every game. It was like watching a pro team. It was kind of like our NBA. Yes, there was the Pacers existed, but not that many people paid attention to them. A lot of their games weren't on TV. Every IU basketball game was on TV, and it just was fun because you always felt like they were going to, pull off the big win. They were going to do that thing. It's kind of like, to some degree, I guess, how like a Duke fan today thinks about their basketball team. Like, you always feel in the back of your head, they're going to come away with that victory. And that's how it was with IU for the longest time. So that's still probably the one that sticks out to me the most. The other one that I'll throw in, just as an aside, I went through 4 years of school at IU. We lost to Purdue in football all 4 years. The fall after I graduated, I came back down and went to the bucket game with my friend Kevin Gray, and driving rainstorm, probably the worst weather I've ever been in for any sporting event. Like, rain just like spraying in your face, coming in sideways at Memorial Stadium. IU ends up with a goal line stand at the end of the game. They beat Purdue, and we rushed the field and actually ripped one of the goalposts down. I didn't get up on the goalpost, but I was right there when it came down. That was a fun experience. That's probably my favorite in-person experience I've had with IU athletics.
That's certainly a fun one. Last question for you. Outside of sports and IU media, you're also quite a food connoisseur. I know I always see you tweeting about different places people should go up and pick a meal. And now's the good time. We're all getting our vaccines. We're ready to head back out and eat at restaurants. Where in Bloomington is a good spot? A couple good spots that people should check out now they're ready to eat out again.
Gosh, I mean, there's so many, and I always get in trouble when I mention one and not another. I mean, my favorites recently, especially if you want outdoor dining, I mean, certainly, stopping by Nick's for a pint and sitting outside on Kirkwood is a unique experience that I hope everybody's had a chance to try out. Fat Dan's down the street at I think it's Lincoln and Kirkwood. Awesome spot, whether you're indoors or outdoors. Big fan of Big Woods. The beer garden at Big Woods on Grant Street is really good. Also, if you haven't been out to the Big Woods out in Nashville, highly recommend that. The Hard Truth Hills location. It's just this huge lodge area out in the woods near Nashville. Worth going to. And I'll say Switchyard as the other one. Switchyard, nice indoor-outdoor setup. And they've got some dynamite pizza and breadsticks now, as well as some really good beer. So if you haven't had the pizza and breadsticks at Switchyard yet, I would highly recommend it. Had a good beer there the other day too. The Raspberry Beret, which is a raspberry wheat brewed by DJ Unique from the Bloomington community. Check that out. There's a lot of other good ones as well. So I mean, there's so many great places in Bloomington. It's for someone like me that enjoys food and enjoys the experience of eating at various places. You could a solid month go out every day and never pick the same place twice, and you'd have great experiences every single time. So we're very blessed here with that.
That's for certain. I think I would run out of money in my wallet pretty quickly if I went out every single day. I found the right food courts a little bit cheaper, but there's certainly a lot of good options here. And Dr. Clavio, really appreciate coming on. We've got our food and beer recommendations set, and also really interesting conversation about sports media as well.
Griffin, thanks as always for having me on, and thanks for hosting all year. I know you've only got probably one more of these to go. So thanks for all your work with it. And again, congrats on the new sports director position at WIUX. Looking forward to working with you there too.
Looking forward to doing that, and appreciate the opportunity I've had to be able to host this over the last 4 months or so. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks.
That will do it for today's episode of Unpaid Interns. As we just said, one more week of episodes next week. We'll be back Wednesday and Friday for 2 senior spotlight issues. We'll be talking to a couple seniors right before they graduate and head out into the world to do big things as Hoosier alums and sports media continue to achieve. If you missed any of our episode today or any of our past Unpaid Interns episodes, you can always check them out on the IU Sports Media YouTube or Twitter page, or if you prefer to listen, you can listen to them on Spreaker or wherever else you get your podcasts. For Dr. Galen Clavio, I'm Griffin Epstein. Thanks so much for watching the Unpaid Interns podcast. We'll talk to you again next week.